Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Start your countdown to the most delicious Sunday of the year at Whole Foods Market. The Easter in Bloom event is on. Experience it in stores from March 29th through April 11th with irresistible deals and delights store-wide. Save on feast-worthy animal welfare certified meats like spiral-cut ham and boneless ribeye. Then add a flash of green to the scene with savings on organic asparagus. Too busy to cook? Don't sleep on their crowd-favorite catering. Find all of that plus Source for Good floral bouquets and more at your local Whole Foods Market.
Scott Strode has been sober for almost a quarter century, but don't be fooled. He looks like a very young guy, and I think he still is reasonably young. He was one of the lucky folks that was able to, or I guess maybe got the gift of desperation during the early part of his life. He has a TED Talk. I think this might be our first guest with a TED Talk. He is the executive director of the Phoenix, which is an incredible community all over America. They're based in Boston and Denver. Those are their major hubs. They're getting a spot in LA. It's an outlet where people can show up with 48 hours sober, and you find your inspiration and your recovery in working out. Anybody can do it. You just got to be 48 hours sober. He speaks about, experiencing childhood trauma early on, and that's one of the reasons why he was looking to check out through alcohol and drugs. This is an amazing story. He's a really cool dude. What I like about this podcast, this particular one, is that we live in the solution a lot. I mean, this guy talks about being brought to his knees and losing his mind on his bathroom floor thinking he was going to die because of drugs. But, man, he's been living in the solution for a long time, and he's been helping other people with their solution. 65,000 people, this group, the Phoenix, has affected and impacted. So he impacted me today. Hopefully he does for you. Somebody that is always impacting America and countries beyond. Kevin Souza.
Hello.
Scott.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, man, what's going on?
Not too much. Thanks for reaching out.
Oh, man, thank you for coming on board to chat with me for a little bit. I can't thank you enough, and I appreciate you fitting us in. Are you traveling today?
I actually just got back to Boston, and I'm here to meet with the Phoenix leadership team. We're doing our strategic planning, and so yeah, I'm back here. I live in Denver normally, but I'm in Boston for a period of time as we expand here. We have sort of our East Coast headquarters here.
And you're from Boston, right?
I got sober here. I'm actually from Pennsylvania, but I got sober here, just a little over 24 years ago.
What part of Pennsylvania?
Lancaster County.
Okay.
Sort of farmland.
Oh, I
know.
I know.
Yourself?
I'm from outside of Philadelphia, Bryn Mawr, Villanova, that area.
Oh yeah, so we probably misspent our youth in some of the same places.
Yeah. Absolutely. So just to give you a quick background, I'm going to give an intro for you, so we don't need to do that right now, we can just get right into the conversation if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Now, how do you say your last name? Strode?
Strode. Yeah.
Strode. Okay. I want to ask you about. First of all, you've been sober for how long?
Just over 24 years.
And you've been doing the Phoenix since 2006.
Correct.
So you're the executive director of the Phoenix. For people who don't know, what exactly is the Phoenix?
The Phoenix is a free, sober, active community that uses the inherent transformative power of activities, some athletic-based, some sort of social events. But really, those are just a place that you meet a new group of friends that support you in your recovery journey. So we use the inherent transformative power of sports and activities to bring people together in recovery, to find the physical and emotional strength they need to stay sober.
And the reason that's the first question I ask you is because I'm just doing a little bit of research. You know, and this is as of a couple years ago, you're talking about tens of thousands of people that you have helped through this.
Over 65,000 people.
Over 65,000 people. And so this is something you started in recovery back in 2006. But before that, take me through your last night drinking and using.
Yeah. So should I give a little background or just go right into
You can give some background. Yeah, give a little background.
Yeah. So I started drinking and using pretty young. I experienced some early childhood trauma, and that was really what I was trying to numb with the drugs and alcohol. Really, what I was trying to do with them is sort of fill in some self-esteem wounds.
What happened the first time? What happened the first time you drank? Do you remember? Like, how'd you feel?
Yeah, I do remember. I mean, for me, it wasn't so much the physical sensation of getting drunk the first time. It was really kind of the status that came with it, right? Like being able to steal booze from the liquor cabinet, or knowing who could buy you beer. It just sort of like elevated my place in my peer group at the time. And I so much wanted to be accepted and part of that. That really was the kick for me, was being able to do that. And then over time, the physical addiction started to kind of take hold from the substances.
I can totally relate, because it's that early on, when you quote unquote cool crowd or whatever, the people that are the knuckleheads that are drinking like us, it feeds your ego, and then eventually it feeds your addiction. So it's like the perfect package.
Yeah, it really was. And so for me, having some of those self-esteem wounds from early childhood stuff, it just fit right in, and I was off and running.
Do you talk about the childhood trauma, exactly what it was?
Not specifically. It was really just stuff that kind of broke down my own self-worth, and for me, I was trying to find that on the outside through kind of where I fit in my peer group, like we were just talking about, or when I couldn't feel that sense of fitting in, I would just numb that pain with more booze or more drugs.
Do you have alcoholism in your family?
I do. I had grew up around alcoholism, and also my father had untreated mental illness, so it was a pretty dynamic childhood.
Yeah, to say the least, right? I mean, there's a lot of times I was predisposed. I think, it was in my family. People used to say my dad was from Connecticut, and his family just, alcoholism all throughout the side of his family. Somebody said it doesn't run, it gallops, and man, so I had my father with the untreated alcoholism, did the best he could without question, but untreated alcoholism, which created some trauma for myself, my brothers, I guess. And then we had that physical dependency and addiction too. So it is just quite the rocket ship.
It really is. And when you grow up around it, it's sort of normalized. I kind of joke about this, but it really wasn't a family picnic till somebody went to the emergency room. And, whether you fell off the side of the above ground pool and broke some ribs, or some cousins got in a fight, or whatever it was just, that was the chaos I was sort of used to. So of course that was sort of the life I started to build for myself.
I heard a guy say it in a meeting just a couple of days ago. Normal's what you get used to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, I look back at my life, and I look at it now in recovery too, when I'm not doing, when I'm not spiritually fit, or, I'm not like I can relate to you when I'm not working out or going to meetings. I get used to stuff that should be abnormal, but it becomes normal.
Yeah, exactly. And, the beauty of kind of the path I've been on recently is like just making that normal something new and something different and something positive. And that's what I found in my own journey getting into athletics.
Well, we're jumping around a little bit here, but the reason I asked you, because we started off with how you've begun this venture in 2006. It has touched the lives of, we're moving towards 100,000 people. But your last night, just, checking up on you and reading stuff about you and watching some videos about you. Your last night was as bad as it gets with alcohol and drugs. And I think it's interesting for people to get a window into that, because here we are talking to you now. You're going back for a leadership. You got a leadership meeting. You're leading people. And tell us about your last night.
Sure. So, towards the end of my drinking and drugging, it had kind of stripped away all those dreams I had of what I could possibly accomplish, when I grew up, and I was just kind of living day to day in between drinking and drugging, and I had been trying to quit for about a year and a half, but never got enough time to call it a relapse, right? Like it was just, I was kept drinking and using, and I was on a cocaine bender, and I had been out for essentially 2 days, and I was so paranoid. I was like locked up in my apartment, thought the cops were after me, had all the lights out, was kind of hiding out in the bathroom, and here I am on this bender drinking and using. And,
if you're at all like me, I'm guessing you're the only person there, right?
Yeah, I'm the only person there. Years ago, it went from being something that was social to something that was just a couple hardcore users and me, and then it was just me. And anyway, I just, my heart was racing, and I, was so sort of strung out. I just knew that that's how my life was going to end. And I couldn't imagine someone having to tell my mom that they found me dead on the bathroom floor somewhere. And I woke up that next day and felt pretty beat up, obviously, but set to changing the way I was living, and that was the last night I drank and used.
What was the next thing you did?
For me, I had already been exposed to boxing, and so the boxing gym was kind of my safe place, believe it or not. But I always say that I was scooped up with as much love as you can find in a boxing gym. But I went in there, and there were a couple other sober guys, and they were teaching me about the sport. But I just started going over there with my gym bag and waiting for the place to open, and would go in and work out and help coach other folks. And then when they close up, I'd go home, and that's how I'd spend my weekends.
And this is when you first stopped using, or was this when you were using too?
This was when I was using too. I was trying to kind of like fill in all that time so I wouldn't be out at bars and boozing. But when I got sober, I just doubled down on that tactic. I just started going all the time, and I'd be there, and I try to surround myself with people that were in recovery that were also in the gym. And that's how I started putting together, a couple of days at the time, and that turned into a week, and that turned into abstinence-based recovery. And
so this is what, 1995, I guess?
What was, if I was good at math, I could tell you. It would be, I have 24 years, so it would be coming up on,
I guess 1997.
97.
And so you're going in there, and you're finding that release. Are you finding what you kind of got from alcohol and drugs in that gym with the camaraderie, with the endorphins and the dopamine hits you get from natural, combat?
Yeah. It was interesting. I was actually finding the stuff I was trying to find in booze in the gym, which was more genuine connections, because these guys were really, I was invested in helping them be better athletes, and they were invested in helping me, and we'd help each other train and get ready for fights or whatever it was. And it was a more genuine and real thing than just being impaired, out with a bunch of other people getting high and drinking. And what really made the difference was it actually began to heal some of those self-esteem wounds, because I could sit a little prouder when I was starting to help coach other people. And all of a sudden I was a mentor for the first time in something. I never really felt like I had anything to mentor somebody in previously. And I started to have my own accomplishments, like getting in the ring for the first time is pretty intimidating. And when you do it, you feel lifted because you took on something that was scary.
Win, lose, or draw.
You accomplished a goal.
And so had you not gotten in the ring to actually fight before you were sober?
I hadn't really gotten in before. I was in there training, and we'd kind of go up and spar against other gyms. And actually, the guy I first got in the ring with was also a guy in recovery. And, those guys became my friends early on and kept me on the path.
What starts to happen for you as this fog, tension, shame, right, starts to lift?
Yeah, for me, it just started to I started to begin to dream of what was possible in my recovery, of who I could actually be, not impaired or hindered by my addiction. And I started getting into climbing. I started, I remember my boxing coach told me to start road work, going out and jogging a couple miles a week. And I could barely run 500 yards, and I had to stop and walk home because I was smoking cigarettes and boozing and all that before. So I finally started running. I could run 3 miles, all that goal setting started to kind of show up in this sort of belief in myself that also reflected it in my belief that I could stay sober. And then, as I got more into that sport, doing triathlon, I started just becoming a different person. I had a positive identity for the first time instead of this negative kind of shame that I'd carry around with me, and how I saw myself.
Well, clearly,
it started to be a more positive self-view.
Clearly, not only you're positive, but you're humble, because you tried to skip over triathlon. How does that, so what the hell happens? You're boxing and you're getting in shape and you're getting that fix from boxing, and you say, hey, let's take this in another direction while I box, and you start to work towards a triathlon?
Yeah. Well, I found out pretty quickly that boxing's not great for your head, So, and I was a heavyweight, so that was an issue. This guy's hit pretty hard. So I wanted to find something else, and I found triathlon. I was just kind of on a whim. Found a personal trainer who was a coach, and she said she coached me for my first race. One of the friends from the boxing gym trained with me, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how to swim, but I had begun to do this thing every year on my recovery anniversary. I would try to do something different or new, or something that I wouldn't have been able to do in my addiction. And this was one of those things. It was around my recovery anniversary, and decided to do my first triathlon. And it was a short triathlon, but I finished it. And I have this joke that, my friend came up, she's like, are you a little nervous? And I said, yeah, how can you tell? And she's like, you're putting on your wetsuit backwards, so I didn't have any clue about what I was doing, but I survived the swim barely, and the bike and the run. And, but I was just hooked, I just started to find these things that helped me start to dream again about how big life could be. And I jumped in with both feet, and that ultimately led me into long distance triathlon. Started racing Ironman, and ultimately competed in the world championship at half Ironman distance.
How'd you do with that?
I did okay. I'm a big guy, so I would pass a lot of people on the swim and the bike, and then the run was just people gone by me the whole way.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I was a lot to move down the road on my feet, but on a bike or swimming, I could do pretty well.
So you mentioned something just about the fact that you got nervous, you put your wetsuit on backwards, and it's nuts because in sobriety, there's firsts, and then there's just overall big moments, no matter how many times you've done certain things. And there's almost like a sober blackout in a way, where you're just kind of, for me, you're just going through it. But the most important part is you're going through it, and you're not getting drunk, and you're not getting high, and everything gets easier. And like you said, you develop skills where you could actually mentor people because you knew the way. In this, we're talking about boxing right now, but now we're talking about the triathlon. You go from not knowing how to do it, totally sober, putting on your wetsuit backwards, to running Ironmans. Yeah, it's incredible. And what I started to realize is
in those activities is also the same hook that you can find in drinking and using. So you do have to be careful. Like, I started realizing, like, I could punish myself with those sports too. Like, I would finish an Ironman, and then I had to do Ironman faster. Then I'd do a mountain bike race. Then I had to do a 24-hour mountain bike race. Like, it always had to be harder and longer. And I started to realize, like, there's a pitfall here as well. It was very similar to my drinking and using. And what I realized, what really filled my heart with these activities was the training and sharing the path with the other people who were, you know, like I like to say, that would rather get up at 5 a.m. to go train as opposed to stay up till 5 a.m. drinking and using. And I started surrounding myself with more and more folks that thought that way. And that was the real magic. So I started focusing in more on the path as the goal, as opposed to the finish line of the race.
Okay, so this is such an interesting topic, because I think a lot of people get sober and they find other addictions, whether they're healthy, quote unquote, like I said before, or not. And I talked to my friend, a buddy of mine, about this. You know, I run 9 miles and I eat like 50,000 calories, and then I get up and I have to run 9 miles again. And it's just like, okay, let's take it easy and find some balance here. And because that's just another obsession. I mean, now I'll always say it's not doing anywhere near the damage that alcohol and drugs were doing to me, but it's still another deal where you become wrapped up in it and you become obsessed. So you're saying that the tribal community, that bond you dealt with the people training, is what you got lost in, and not so much attaching yourself to the end result.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I went for the end result first. Like, there was something about boxing, like smashing the heavy bag as hard as I could was something I needed at that time. But then you start to realize, like, your hands are all busted up and you're getting arthritis and you're super young, and you're like, you know, you can't do that for the rest of your life. And you just start to realize that, like, I'm still seeking my emotional well-being outside of me, because something is getting in the way of me finding it on the inside. So you know, that extreme, I always think if it's destructive to you or people around you, you got to look at your relationship with it. And that means that, you know, I know triathlete friends that don't see their kids on the weekends because they're getting their miles in training. That's not that different than not being with your family because you're out boozing and doing other stuff. Like, you can find this unhealthy relationship with those things. But to your point, it's way better, you know, it's way better to be riding a mountain bike than smoking meth. but somewhere in there too, you can also find this healthy balance, right? Where you find that fulfillment and joy and goal setting and accomplishment, but you also have to do it in a balanced way where there's room for the people in your life and to kind of take good care of yourself also.
What was the conduit to that balance for you? I know you touched on it a little bit. If you could elaborate.
You know, I think it was the sort of the joy side of sharing that stuff with other people. Like, it was just the fun, you know. It was like you go out climbing and you come back and you had some sort of, like, you know, sort of sketchy day where the weather was bad, you got stormed off a climb you're on, but at the end of the day, you're fist bumping with your friends and you're like, well, man, that was incredible. And man, you really showed up for me in that one part, and we wouldn't have made it through if you didn't bring extra water or whatever. Like, you just have these adventures, and it's in those where you start to, like, you realize you're just living and actually reaching some of your full potential. Whereas boozing, you know, I started it because it was a coping mechanism, but it stopped working for me almost as quickly as it started. These things were ways to cope that had a longer fuse, right? It burned longer and stayed with you because it actually created positive sort of self-esteem and positive connections with others.
I love that. It burned longer and stayed with you longer. I've never really been able to package it and describe it to people, but that is what working out, connecting with other people, whether it's when you're not working out or when you're working out. And what you're talking about too, And again, you're a humble dude. You're helping people. I mean, you are on the one end, right, finding a way to cope, but you're sharing time with other people, bringing things to the table.
Yeah, and that was where the shift happened for me, where I started realizing my life had gotten really big and full of like opportunity. And I saw a lot of my friends, even in long-term recovery, still white knuckling, like, trying to hold on each day. And I was like, dude, you need to go up a mountain with me or something. Like, let's get out and do something. And we started doing that. And my climbing partner at the time was in recovery. My other climbing partner was a clinical social worker. And so it was like this perfect combo. I was like, why don't we just start taking more people with us? And that was the beginning of what later would become the Phoenix.
So now we're in the Phoenix. I mean, we've reached a point in the conversation where this starts up. How do you get something like this off the ground?
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about starting a nonprofit. Fortunately, I knew a lawyer who helped me through the paperwork, but we knew we wanted to make it a nonprofit because we wanted it to be free to anybody who was 48 hours clean and sober. And we picked that low bar to entry because we wanted as many people to be able to access it as they could. And it's hard to get 48 hours if you're in early recovery.
It's hard to get 10 minutes.
Yeah, but if you could do that, you could dip your toe in, you could try rock climbing or hiking or whatever, and you do it with other people in recovery and reflection. Like maybe Friday night you'd come to a Phoenix event.
What's a Phoenix event? Like for instance?
Any activity where you're 48 hours clean and sober. It's led by a Phoenix volunteer or staff member, and you adhere to our code of conduct, which basically says if it's not supportive, then it's not welcome. And it's not like you get kicked out for that. It's just a handrail to help folks figure out how to build sort of nurturing community together. But you show up and it could be yoga or climbing or a hike or a bike ride or a social event or art night. It can be anything that just is a meaningful activity that brings people together in recovery. If you can show up at one and you don't need any equipment, you don't need any know-how, we'll show you how to do it. And oftentimes the instructor's another person in recovery or an ally, somebody who's been impacted by substance use disorder through a loved one or something like that.
I love how you bring those people in under the tent, because that's kind of what this podcast is about. Honestly, sometimes I forget that, but this is for people who are dealing with folks that are struggling or getting clean or in and out, because it's so hard. I mean, they're going through it just as much as the addict is, because it is such a freaking roller coaster ride, and they can't even, in most times, put their finger on it. So to have an outlet like this, where, it's like we could, there's Al-Anon, right? And there's other places where people who have loved ones that are in recovery or that are still getting messed up can go. And then there's a place like this, dude, where, that's incredible that you have put your arms around that group of folks as well.
Well, as you know, right? Like the family goes through the addiction for sure with the person. So why not let the family go through the recovery together too? And one thing that I think is not talked about enough is I kind of think of the family dynamic a lot of times as like a theatrical play, right? Like you get typecast as the addict and alcoholic. And then all of a sudden you're trying to change your role in the play, and everyone's like, whoa. Like, we don't want you to drink and use, but you're the guy who like messes up the family, Christmas party or whatever. Like if you're not doing it, then we actually realize that Uncle so-and-so might be the one that's also doing it, So it's like, you're trying to get out of this role. Everybody almost has to get to know each other again as this family now with someone in recovery. And sometimes it makes people look at their part in the dynamic as well. So I think like if we can create a place where the family went through the addiction together, let's create a place where the family can also go through recovery together. And same thing, they have to be 48 hours clean and sober. They have to adhere to that same code of conduct. But if they do, they can come too.
And where are you guys located? Like, give me a rundown of that so people listening,
Sure.
can know.
Yeah, so we're we have sort of a East Coast, West Coast, and Central headquarters. We have a building in Denver, a building in Boston, and we're looking to hopefully find some donors to help us get a building in LA. But other than that, we have volunteers that lead Phoenix in communities across the country. So we're essentially in 40 plus states and 60 something communities. And we just launched our Phoenix app, so anybody can pull it down from the App Store. It's just the Phoenix and it has a big red bird. And you can find a Phoenix event near you. We're in most places, and if we're not in your community, you could raise a hand as a volunteer and start it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a lot of people. I go to meetings, right? I'm a 12-step AA guy. Are you involved in any kind of 12-step stuff, or is that a part of your recovery?
I have been over the years. When I first got sober, I was really just in the boxing gym and out climbing and doing triathlon. But 6 years into my recovery, I realized like most of my friends go to this young people's meeting. Why don't I go with them? So I went and I found a sponsor there and I started working the steps. And so it's been part of my story, but not as much in the early side.
Yeah, I mean, and that's whatever, and that's another part of this vehicle I'm trying to move forward or drive here. It's like, hey, whatever works for you. If you got something that makes you fulfilled, and you're off drugs, and you're off drinking, and your life, if you're all like me, was a disaster before you got sober, like, I want to hear about it. I think, and I have buddies who are in the AA community all around the country who hopefully will hear this and maybe want to get involved, or people that I don't even know, because there's people out there that are involved, whether it's, I said 12 steps or a different kind of recovery, that just want to help and be a part and pass along what they have for somebody else. And a lot of these people love working out and just connecting like we've talked about. So that's a real opportunity for folks. This is the Phoenix is a real opportunity for folks. I love the idea.
The world looks different behind the handlebars of a rad electric bike. Grabbing takeout looks less like greasy styrofoam boxes and more like a cross-town adventure. Ride shares look less like piling into the back of a car and more like grabbing fresh air with your friends. And commuting can even start to look like the best part of your day. That's because with RAD, the world is what you make of it, not what it makes of you. See for yourself with a 14-day free trial. Find your fun at radpowerbikes.com.
Start your countdown to the most delicious Sunday of the year at Whole Foods Market. The Easter in Bloom event is on. Experience it in stores from March 29th through April 11th with irresistible deals and delights store-wide. Save on feast-worthy animal welfare certified meats like spiral cut ham and boneless ribeye. Then add a flash of green to the scene with savings on organic asparagus. Too busy to cook? Don't sleep on their crowd favorite catering. Find all of that plus Source for Good floral bouquets and more at your local Whole Foods Market.
I love that you mentioned that, because it bridges naturally both ways too. Like, you may show up and never been in the rooms of the 12-step community, and you meet somebody and you're inspired by their recovery, and they're going to their meeting, their eye openers meeting in the morning before the workout, and all of a sudden you join them, and the other happens. Like, we have folks, that have had 10 years in recovery, and their life is still pretty small, and in sort of like where they think they can go with it, what they dream is possible. And they come in and go up the climbing wall and their mind's blown. And a year later, they're gone out to Yosemite with some friends to go climbing, and their life gets really big, So we have both things happen.
Why do you think, sometimes it's difficult for people even to get in the positions that you just mentioned that we're talking about because of the stigma? Why do you think that's such a problem still in society in 2021? It is still, we like to think it's not, but it is. Why is it still such a problem, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a couple things. It's going to take sort of pioneers, right? I think in the recovery community that are willing to be open about their own recovery. That's why I appreciate what you're doing so much. It's like you have a voice and you're using it to bring this into the light. And I think that's awesome. We can still respect, kind of traditions of 12-step communities and keep that stuff, as a place of anonymity for people who need that safe space to step into. But like, I wear a t-shirt that says sober across the chest.
I've seen it. It's
and,
cool.
Yeah. And I'm proud of it. Like, I'm not that I just wear with pride. And it's amazing how many people say, hey man, me too. I got 6 years or whatever. Or somebody comes up to me and is like, I wish my cousin would wear that shirt.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, here's my card. If I can help him, give him my number,
Yeah, yeah.
And we just, those of us that are willing, to really kind of wear that sober shirt, we can make space for other people to choose, and bring it into the light enough that we start to chip away at that stigma.
One of the things you talk about, I saw in an interview, was almost like the domino effect that shame can have. A family in your neighborhood will have a child, brother, sister, whoever, that overdoses on drugs, and they won't tell anybody. It's so much shame.
Yeah.
And then the family down the block who doesn't, hasn't had an impact that a story like that could deliver, they have a son who overdoses, or the person we're talking about generally overdoses. And it's this tight lid we keep on addiction because of the shame attached to it that keeps people dying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine if people actually turned out, in a way to help in a non-judgmental way, to like really be there for each other in these tough times, around substance use disorder or mental health struggles or whatever it is, then we'd be more prepared if that came up in our own life, right? Because we sort of take the shame out of it. We start to realize, like, maybe there's some resources out there, and here's how we got plugged in our community, and now we can help somebody else with that. And it's just something we need to just move past, honestly. And I think if we can be a voice that helps people realize, I think of it this way, like, most of us in society are seeking our emotional well-being externally with something, by what we look like, how much money we make, where we live, what our job is. We just chose a drink and a drug, right? Like, our thing, that was our thing. And ours got loud enough that we had to listen to it. But other people have other things they're using. It's just they're using something different.
Yeah.
And so if we just realize it's a human experience, right, and that we all can heal, and we all have this intrinsic strength, we just need to find a place to let it out, then I think we'd be way better off.
I like how you say we're all recovering from the human experience.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we really are. I wanted to ask you too about, you're a face and you're out there. Do you ever feel this? I'm just curious about this. Do you ever feel any pressure, to live a certain way, to act a certain way? Does it almost help keep you on the path, or is it like is it sometimes exhausting?
It's both, I'd say. Like, it definitely. I was like, I can't go pick up a beer. I'd blow up this whole thing we built. Right?
Right?
Like,
yeah.
But it's also one of those things that, like, I think that I would like to just be one of many, because, like, the more of us that put our shoulder into this issue and start leaning into it and trying to come up with change, like, what hurts my heart a little bit is, like, the lack of sort of entrepreneurship in how our country's approaching this. Like, we kind of wait for sort of DC to release whatever funding they're going to in the space. Then the people that get that funding go get that funding, and they do that thing, which is, what if we said, how do we create something so much better tomorrow that the way we're approaching it today becomes obsolete because we're actually making a difference? Like, that's the kind of conversation I'd like to see start happening, where thought leaders are coming together and, like, let's sort of blow this whole thing up, how we're approaching this. And instead of just a drug to get you off drugs, like, let's figure out how to tap into the intrinsic strength we all have, because everybody who's struggling with substance use disorder also has the intrinsic strength inside them to be the solution to their own problem. If folks like yourself and other people that have gone before can scoop them up with that love and help them get them on the path, then recovery is possible for them too.
And look, I don't think, hey man, somebody wants to be sober and they want to keep it anonymous, like 150%. But I also do think it's a kind of a bummer that, you know, some of the coolest people I know are sober, whatever your definition of cool is. Some of the people I like the most that wear life like a loose shirt, you know, and nobody knows it. And I'm like, God damn, you know, because people get the idea that we're all hanging out in church basements, you know, singing Kumbaya or judging other people. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And I love people like you getting out there and, you know, basically you're holding gatherings all over the country where people can go and get well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I love about it too is like, it becomes like, so for example, we have CrossFit's a big part of our programming. We have kind of a collaboration with CrossFit corporately. And we had a bunch of our guys go to a CrossFit competition and they crushed it. Like they did great. Like they're like super athletes, right? They're in some ways more disciplined than other athletes because they're not going out drinking, they're training, they're eating well, they're now on this path, and their performance sort of reflects that. But there's this great part where somebody came over and they're like, hey, what's that thing all the guys have on their ankles? And I was like, oh, they're ankle monitors, right? Like they're all, most of them are on probation, you know?
Yeah.
But here they are at the end of this thing on the podium, you know, standing up there with first and second place, and they're wearing sober shirts, and they're, for lack of a better term, starting to paint this picture that recovery can be badass.
Yes.
And awesome.
Yes.
And it's something to be excited about. It's not like when I got sober, and maybe you felt this way too, but you kind of felt like your life was ending.
For sure.
And what if we paint the picture that life actually begins when you make that decision, and that it's something that you should just jump into sooner because there's so much out there for you.
I mean, dude, that is absolutely the truth. And especially for me being, you know, an addict, I used to sit on a bar stool, high on drugs, lying to people about doing stuff that I do now sober, that I'm actually doing.
Yeah.
That I had no shot of doing if I stayed high or drunk. And that is something that I think for people to see physically, right? Like the guys out winning the CrossFit competitions with the ankle monitors on. Like those aren't leg weights, all right? Like these are guys who are starting to walk the path and have been given the opportunity to do that. What's it been like for you to see some of those? I mean, if you have one or two that jumps out that you want to share, but like the success stories, I'm sure you've had people come up under you that have really just blown the doors off it.
Yeah, that's amazing to see. Like, you know, at the Phoenix, I kind of think of it as a movement, not a nonprofit. You know, like it's anybody who is passionate about something and cares about this issue can raise their hand to be a volunteer to start Phoenix in their community. And I just was moved by all of those volunteers, how many lives they change, and in places where I've never been, I've never met them, never been to any of their Phoenix events, but the people coming out of their events are having that same Phoenix moment that I did when I got in the ring for the first time, or somebody else did when they tied into the climbing rope for the first time. Like they truly are paying it forward. And it just continues to remind me about the intrinsic strength and the resiliency in people. And, you know, I don't know. I think the moment that stands out for me is, so I raced all these Ironman, all this stuff, and then started a nonprofit. It grew to be a national nonprofit. So I pretty much just work now and try to stay fit on the side.
Okay.
But I went to a Phoenix ride and I like bonked, right? Like I hit the wall. We're riding up this hill. My legs were shot. I'm like trying to get to this top of the hill. And there's this volunteer at the top pulled over on the side of the road, a Phoenix volunteer, and he reaches into his pocket on his cycling jersey and he gives me a gel, you know, and I like eat this thing because I'm like hitting the wall. I needed some sugar. So I was like, eat this gel. And he's like, yeah, man, in my volunteer training, they told me I got to carry some extra snacks in case people.
He has no idea who you are, right?
Yeah. And so I'm like, in some ways, years later, I saved my own life by this volunteer guy giving me this gel. But anyway, it was just so cool to see how he had no judgment about me. He just was there for me. He waited for me at the top of that hill. And I continue to get to have my own Phoenix moments, even inside of this bigger thing. And imagine if we did that for each other in society more broadly. Imagine if we just waited at the top of the hill to help somebody who's having a hard time getting up it, whatever that hill is for them. Like we could do this for more than just the recovery community.
Well, and if we applied that rule you guys have, right, that guide rail, just be supportive, or we don't,
Yep.
we'd rather not have it.
Yeah, it's simple.
You have a TED Talk, which I don't talk to too many people who have TED Talks, so. That's pretty, I don't know if that's, a shot at me or, I think it probably says a lot more about you and your success and your ability to convey your recovery and inspiration to folks. But without giving it all away, people can find it online. Just Scott Strode, STRODE. It'll be on this podcast, but, TED Talk. What are some of the key points you hit on in that talk?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out for me on that is that moment where we need moments of perspective on our life where we can see the potential that's within us. And I think for folks struggling with addiction, we need enough of a clear head and that often gives us that moment of perspective on our life. That's why, if you've been to treatment 3 times and you go a 4th, don't feel defeated, right? Like maybe you needed that 4th time to get that moment of perspective. I was on the bathroom floor paranoid enough times using and drinking, and it took number 27 or whatever time it was for me doing that for it to stick. But you need a moment of perspective on your life. And you need this belief that you can change your fate, right? That you can change your life and the way you're living it. And there's something about the strength you find in sort of moving your body. If you're new to recovery, and you're trying to get sober, try to get one day clean and go out for a walk. If you got one day, try to get 2. And go out for a run. If you get that, try to get 3 and do it with somebody else. Just start building on it slowly, and it's amazing how it starts to take shape. Recovery is possible for all of us. It's just sometimes we gotta sort of stand on the top of the mountain to be able to see that within us.
Were you surprised at yourself when you're giving that TED Talk? You're like, man, this is I've come a long way.
Yeah, I do. I am often, I kind of joke, but I never thought that, there was a time in my life I didn't know you put the lid back on a bottle of booze. I thought it was just you pop the top and then it's good to go.
Yeah.
And then I'm living in a city now in Boston where I used to smoke crack in alleyways here.
Yeah.
And to go from that to being able to use that experience and my experience of climbing and triathlon and all this other stuff to help others think about all that potential that isn't realized in the people that are out there now. If we could get them on the path with us, this country would be unstoppable.
Was it hard to start this nonprofit? I mean, walk me through what that was like. Again, without giving exhausting detail. I know you don't have all day.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah. I mean, I think the hard part is I didn't sort of have a business background, right? I had this heart drive to start a nonprofit. I would say to myself, if I could speak to myself back then, I would say try to partner with somebody who's already doing something. Because a lot of people are like, oh no, my nonprofit's a little different. I'm like, I'm sure there's something out there. excuse me, but if you want to help veterans, there's probably a great veterans nonprofit you could go partner up with.
Gotcha.
If you want to help do something like Phoenix, why don't you just help start Phoenix? Like we're already rolling, and we've already kind of done the hard work of clearing the road. So I'd say collaborate and partner up with people, but I didn't know that wisdom then, and so we just kind of charged off doing our own thing. And I'd say the hardest part was getting folks to care about the people we serve in the way that we wanted them to. So to break that down a little bit more, like there's some perception I think that people have sometimes that it's the addict's fault and that it's a moral failing. And I think we need to let that go, because the more I've learned about, adverse childhood experience and some of the traumas that members who come to our program have been through, no surprise they're drinking and using to numb that.
Yeah.
Right? Like let all that go and just realize that they don't want to be in that life either, and do what you can to help them, like to get sort of funders to start to think differently about this. There's a term you'll hear in sort of philanthropy around evidence-based practices. If we only bet on evidence-based practices, what about the innovations that actually could maybe even be better than them?
Yeah.
And Phoenix was one of those things where in the early days, they're like, wait, so you're just going to take people out in recovery and ride bikes with them and it's going to keep them sober? And I was like, yep, pretty much. Like,
yeah, that's never been done before, so we don't know if we can let you do it.
Yeah, but over time, we started to have thought leaders that are philanthropists also come alongside us and say, we can believe there can be a better way, that maybe it's not just a funding issue, it's actually an innovation issue in this space, and started betting on Phoenix in a big way. And that's what helped get us to as many places as we are today. How
have you seen the recovery community? I mean, we talked about sort of the underbelly of it with the shame and the stigma, but how have you seen it evolve over the course of, for you, the last quarter century?
What's really cool about that is I do think, not as quickly as we wanted to, I do think the stigma and the shame is starting to melt and starting to go away to some degree. Because, in the early days, like I'd wear my sober shirt around some of my recovery friends and they would feel uncomfortable. They're like, I don't know, man, that's kind of bold,
Uh-huh.
And I was like, I don't think it is. And now there's people in Phoenix that are posting on their social media about them being in recovery and having a tough day. And other Phoenix people in their social media feed are hitting them up and saying, all right, where are you today? I'm going to get some women together. We're going to come over there and get you to a meeting. And the woman who posted it is, within, 6 or 7 responses on our social feed, there's women showing up at her house to get her connected.
Yeah.
And it's like, people are already being open about it. Like, we need to lean into that and not let sort of our older mental models like hold us up from the innovation that could come, because, sobriety is on TikTok already, like I barely know how to open the app, but, like it's going to innovate and it's going to do it because the need is there and people, want to find a better way. Let's just lean into that and let what we build tomorrow be so much better than what we have today, that maybe there's less people that have to go down the path that you and I did.
How much speaking are you doing? What?
As much as I can. Like, I really want to get out there and just share the story of the Phoenix and continue to kind of inspire people alongside what we're doing, but also innovating in the space. Because I don't think that, a pharma solution to a pharma problem is the answer.
No, I don't think
so.
Either.
I think that we keep adding treatment beds, but the problem's bigger than it's ever been. Like, I think that we need to go back to this more primal place of of taking care of our community and our tribe, and scooping up the people that are around you and supporting them however you can. And I think we need to let go of all the mental models that the person with the substance use disorder is the problem, right? Like, that's just a symptom in my mind of their drinking and using is just a symptom of something deeper. Let's go after what's deeper.
Speaking of going deep, I got about 3 more minutes with you, and I'll let you get on to your life. What have you seen with the opioid crisis and addiction with that and heroin use? Because when I was using, if I was around, I believe I would be dead. And it doesn't sound like it was a huge part of your story. We were kind of ahead of that in a way. But now, I mean, it's ripping society apart. And, how have you seen it where, I guess from the recovery perspective, I mean, people have to come to you as hopeless can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm in the same boat as you, like, really wasn't as present when I was at the peak of my addiction. And
I certainly wasn't saying no. It just didn't. Nobody was offering.
Yeah, for sure. But I think, like, the difference is, as it's like the lethality of it. Like, I feel like if somebody raises a hand for help and we can't get them on the path within a couple of years, we have a pretty good chance of losing them because that it's such a lethal drug. And I think that I believe, if you read about adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs, there's a pretty strong evidence about how early childhood stuff impacts our substance use. And if the loss of our parents and the incarceration and overdoses and all of these things impact the kids, imagine the kids coming up under this addiction crisis. So I think the next wave is bigger. So we need to move now. Like, as a country, we need to mobilize in a major way to bring some hope to our communities and get on top of this thing, or the next wave is going to be bigger.
Well, and that is a realistic way to look at it, right? Like, the more we don't run to give these people help, the ones who want it, the more likely it is they're going to die. That's just sucks, but it's the reality. I mean, you get people dying from fentanyl all the time, and it sucks to say it, but it's all the time. I got a buddy who just got sober off of that stuff, and he knows if he goes back out, he knows it's likely that he dies. I mean, this is back. I'm a tenant of the rooms, right? And the big book said go out and try more drinking. We're not living in that world anymore in certain aspects of this fight. And we've got to just give people all the hope and support we can.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think we gotta mobilize, and we gotta do it now. I mean, I think the pandemic that just happened told us, how much people are in pain. When you look at suicide rates going up and overdoses and alcohol consumption, I was just reading an article about even people for getting on the list for liver transplants are like higher now because of the way that drinking was during the pandemic. Like, it is, we are sort of at the peak of this, and we need to move quickly or it will cycle up again.
Yeah.
And that's why Phoenix is, we grew at an exponential rate. Like, most people would say, don't grow your nonprofit, from 7 communities to 60 communities in like 2 years. But we had to try, right? Like, we have to try because we need to throw everything at this that we can. And if Phoenix can help anybody, let's get it to more cities. Yeah,
I mean, not that this is a fair comparison, but you've never told like EMS to not set up in certain corners of America. Let's get out there. Let's see how we can have the impact. All right, Scott, I'm going to let you go. But anything else before any other gems you want to drop on us? Because this has been inspiring for me, and I feel very good right now. So hopefully, like you said, it'll be a slow burn. And I'll be able to share this.
I appreciate it. Thanks for for sharing about the Phoenix. And if people want to learn more, they can just go to thephoenix.org. And if there's somebody who wants to support it coming to the town, they can make a donation there too.
All right. Thephoenix.org. It is a free, sober, active community that helps people rise, recover, and live through the power of fitness. It's the real deal. It's 40, 50 cities all over the country. It's locations people can get involved, man. So
yeah, just show up, and 48 hours sober is the only place of admission.
All right, man. Scott, I cannot thank you enough. This will be up tomorrow, so I'll shoot you a link via text. Dude, thanks for sharing the message.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for what you do. I really appreciate that you're out there.
Yeah, thank you, man. I'll hopefully see you down the road, man. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right, see you, Scott. Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.